Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX with me, Devika Devan. In what could mark a major diplomatic breakthrough, US President Donald Trump has announced that he will be arranging face-to-face talks between Russian and Ukrainian presidents to help end the war. Trump has added that Putin and Zelensky talks would be followed by a trilateral summit involving the three nations. Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff are coordinating with Moscow and Kyiv for the same. But what really are Ukraine's priorities at this point in time? From what we understand, the first priority is a complete halt of all hostilities, including Russian military strikes, starting with a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. The second priority is complete withdrawal of Russian forces from occupied Ukrainian territories, including those in 2014. The third priority is ironclad security guarantees involving US, NATO, European allies to prevent future aggression. And number four is accountability for Russian leaders responsible for the war, recognition of atrocities during conflict. Speaking of which, Russian President Vladimir Putin and his priorities seem to be the following. The first one being withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the Donbas region, giving Russia control of this territory. Number two is recognition of Russia's sovereignty over Crimea. The third is securing official status of Russian language in Ukraine. And the fourth is, while Putin has expressed willingness to consider NATO-style security guarantees for Ukraine, he remains adamant that his opposition to Ukraine's membership to NATO be respected. What will it take, however, to broker a peace deal? We take this conversation forward. I have with me on the broadcast Julia Kazdobina, Senior Fellow, Ukrainian Prism, joining us from Kyiv. Ms. Kazdobina, thank you so much for speaking with NewsX. I want to begin by understanding from you, we've just learned a few minutes ago that Donald Trump has spoken about the possibility of UK and German troops being present in Ukraine, and that in his perspective, having those boots on the ground should not be a problem. How do you view these developments? Do you think that that's something Russia would possibly agree to?
Well, that's something that Russia most likely is not going to like, and we have already heard some statements from the Russian MFA spokesperson. I don't remember her name, but she said that any presence of foreign troops on the Ukrainian territory is going to be an escalation that could lead to the Third World War III. Of course, she doesn't mention the presence of the Russian troops on the Ukrainian territory, which are also foreign troops. But for Ukraine, it's essential that we do have security guarantees, and that those are provided by our fellow European nations, because Russian war in Ukraine is not only a challenge to Ukraine, it's also a challenge to the entire European security order. And we believe that we have to deter Russian aggression jointly. And so Ukraine will only welcome if other countries send their troops to Ukraine to serve as they say, as a reassurance force. And that's something that's being discussed within the context of the coalition of the willing. And so to make sure that Russian aggression doesn't happen again after any sort of a deal is made.
Ms. Kazdobina, what exactly, in your perspective, would that mean when we talk about security guarantees? Membership of the NATO, Donald Trump has briefly said, is possibly not going to happen. And it's in the same context that he's spoken about several European nations possibly having military presence in Ukraine. But if that's something that Russia would not agree to, in your perspective, where does that really leave the peace talks?
Well, Russia is very ambiguous on these security guarantees. So coming out of the conversation between Mr. Witkoff and President Putin earlier Mr. Witkov came out of that and said that Russia has agreed to security guarantees to Ukraine. And actually, at the end of the Alaska talks, at the press conference, President Putin also mentioned that Ukraine will need security guarantees. But he never really mentioned what those will be. And so Ukraine, as the party who is the most interested in this, first and foremost, Ukraine has accepted the position of the United States that Ukraine is not going to become a NATO member, although it still believes that this is the best security guarantee there is. But President Trump said, no, this is not going to happen. And so Ukraine is now working on building an alternative security framework. And President Zelensky, in today's press conference, said that it brings together a group of about 30 nations, and they are different nations. Some of them are European, some of them are NATO members, some of them are not, like Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, and who are willing to help Ukraine and to serve as Ukraine's security guarantors, but they will provide assistance in accordance with their abilities. So, for example, some nations are not allowed to send their troops to other countries by their constitution, so they can maybe provide some financial support. Like some other countries could be better in maritime capabilities, so they could help protect a coastline and things like that.
Ms. Kazdobina, I also want to understand from you, when we talk about no NATO membership anymore, there was a perception across the world that the war began in the first place because of this lingering aspect of the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO. However, Donald Trump is now very clear that that's going to be a major issue as far as the peace deal is concerned, and he's not willing to offer it. Is there any sense of betrayal amongst the people of Ukraine when you hear the sort of statements or the sort of peace deals that are being made on your behalf?
Well, so far there have not been any public opinion polling regarding this change. I mean, Ukraine is still working with NATO to enhance its capabilities and to build up its military in accordance with Western standards. But we were told explicitly that we're not going to become a NATO member. But I think it's also an important point, because despite this very clear statement from Donald Trump that Ukraine is not becoming a NATO member, Russia still insists on continuing its aggression. Russia still refuses to agree to a ceasefire. And so to me, it indicates clearly that Russia is not a victim that it's trying to portray itself. It is an aggressor. It does commit this aggression willingly, and it's going to be difficult to resolve this. But Ukraine needs security guarantees, and I think if those are efficient, Ukrainian people will accept them, even if that's outside of NATO.
And will there be disappointment if Ukraine does have to, or rather, what would be the extent of disappointment if Ukraine has to accept giving up parts of its land to Russia as part of the peace deal?
Well, Ukraine will not agree to cede the land legally, so we may accept that we cannot reconquer it at this point militarily. But we will not agree to give that up legally and recognize Russian sovereignty over that land. And also, Ukraine will not withdraw from the parts of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson oblasts, which Russia has failed to occupy. Because Russia claims that it's this really strong power, but if you look at how much it managed to capture since the beginning of this full-scale aggression, and if you detract the land that it captured in the early stages of the conflict, meaning 2014, 2015, then it's a very small section. So it's absolutely clear that Russia is not capable of capturing those territories. And so she's trying to bully Ukraine into accepting its totally unacceptable conditions, and Ukraine will not be bullied. Russia is not as strong as it would like to seem. So there's gonna be no disappointment. Ukraine is not surrendering that.
Okay, all right, Ms. Kazdobina, thank you so much for joining us and giving the Indian audience a perspective from Kyiv.